اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. اللهم إني أسألك وأتوجه إليك بنبيك نبي الرحمة محمد صلى الله عليه وآله. يا أبا القاسم يا رسول الله، يا إمام الرحمة يا سيدنا ومولانا، إنا توجهنا واستشفعنا وتوسلنا بك إلى الله وقدمناك بين يدي حاجاتنا يا وجيها عند الله، اشفع لنا عند الله. يا أبا الحسن يا أمير المؤمنين، يا علي بن أبي طالب، يا حجة الله على خلقه، يا سيدنا ومولانا، إنا توجهنا واستشفعنا وتوسلنا بك إلى الله وقدمناك بين يدي حاجاتنا يا وجيها عند الله، اشفع لنا عند الله. يا فاطمة الزهراء يا بنت محمد، يا قرة عين الرسول، يا سيدتنا ومولاتنا، إنا توجهنا واستشفعنا وتوسلنا بك إلى الله وقدمناك بين يدي حاجاتنا يا وجيهة عند الله، اشفعي لنا عند الله. يا أبا محمد يا حسن بن علي، أيها المجتبى يا ابن رسول الله، يا حجة الله على خلقه، يا سيدنا ومولانا، إنا توجهنا واستشفعنا وتوسلنا بك إلى الله وقدمناك بين يدي حاجاتنا يا وجيها عند الله، اشفع لنا عند الله. يا أبا عبد الله يا حسين بن علي، أيها الشهيد يا ابن رسول الله، يا حجة الله على خلقه، يا سيدنا ومولانا، إنا توجهنا واستشفعنا وتوسلنا بك إلى الله وقدمناك بين يدي حاجاتنا يا وجيها عند الله، اشفع لنا عند الله. يا أبا الحسن يا ولي بن الحسين، يا زين العابدين يا ابن رسول الله، يا حجة الله على خلقه، يا سيدنا ومولانا، إنا توجهنا واستشفعنا وتوسلنا بك إلى الله وقدمناك بين يدي حاجاتنا يا وجيها عند الله، اشفع لنا عند الله. يا أبا جعفر يا محمد بن علي، أيها الباقر يا ابن رسول الله يا حجة الله على خلقه يا سيدنا ومولانا إنا توجهنا واستشفعنا وتوسلنا بك إلى الله وقدمناك بين يدي حاجاتنا يا وجيها عند الله اشفع لنا عند الله يا أبا عبد الله يا جعفر بن محمد أيها الصادق يا ابن رسول الله يا حجة الله على خلقه يا سيدنا ومولانا إنا توجهنا واستشفعنا وتوسلنا بك إلى الله وقدمناك بين يدي حاجاتنا يا وجيها عند الله اشفع لنا عند الله يا أبا الحسن يا موسى بن جعفر أيها الكاظم يا ابن رسول الله يا حجة الله على خلقه يا سيدنا ومولانا إنا توجهنا واستشفعنا وتوسلنا بك إلى الله وقدمناك بين يدي حاجاتنا يا وجيها عند الله اشفع لنا عند الله يا أبا الحسن يا علي بن موسى أيها الرضا يا ابن رسول الله يا حجة الله على خلقه يا سيدنا ومولانا إنا توجهنا واستشفعنا وتوسلنا بك إلى الله وقدمناك بين يدي حاجاتنا يا وجيها عند الله اشفع لنا عند الله يا أبا جعفر يا محمد بن علي أيها التقي الجواد يا ابن رسول الله يا حجة الله على خلقه يا سيدنا ومولانا إنا توجهنا واستشفعنا وتوسلنا بك إلى الله وقدمناك بين يدي حاجاتنا يا وجيها عند الله اشفع لنا عند الله يا أبا الحسن يا علي بن محمد أيها الهادي النقي ابن رسول الله يا حجة الله على خلقه يا سيدنا ومولانا إنا توجهنا واستشفعنا وتوسلنا بك إلى الله وقدمناك بين يدي حاجاتنا يا وجيها عند الله اشفع لنا عند الله يا أبا محمد يا حسن بن علي أيها الزكي العسكري يا ابن رسول الله يا حجة الله على خلقه يا سيدنا ومولانا إنا توجهنا واستشفعنا وتوسلنا بك إلى الله وقدمناك بين يدي حاجاتنا يا وجيها عند الله اشفع لنا عند الله يا وصي الحسن والخلف الحجة أيها القائم المنتظر المهدي يا ابن رسول الله يا حجة الله على خلقه يا سيدنا ومولانا إنا توجهنا واستشفعنا وتوسلنا بك إلى الله وقدمناك بين يدي حاجاتنا يا وجيها عند الله اشفع لنا عند الله. Ask for your hajat from Allah subhanahu. يا سادتي وموالي إني توجهت بكم أئمتي وعدتي ليوم فقري وحاجتي إلى الله وتوسلت بكم إلى الله واستشفعت بكم إلى الله فاشفعوا لي عند الله واستنقذوني من ذنوبي عند الله فإنكم وسيلتي إلى الله وبحبكم وبقربكم أرجو نجاة من الله فكونوا عند الله رجائي يا سادتي يا أولياء الله صلى الله عليهم أجمعين ولعن الله أعداء الله ظالميهم من الأولين والآخرين آمين رب العالمين. الله الأرواح ممنوعات فاتحة. بسم الله الرحمن أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين. الصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين خاتم النبيين أبي القاسم محمد وأهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين الذين أذهب الله عنهم الرجس وطهرهم تطهيرا. أما بعد فقد قال الله تبارك وتعالى وقوله الحق وهو أصدق القائلين. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. والضحى والليل إذا سجى ما ودعك ربك وما قلى وللآخرة خير لك من الأولى ولسوف يعطيك ربك فترضى ألم يجدك يتيما فآوى ووجدك ضالا فهدى ووجدك عائلا فأغنى فأما اليتيم فلا تقهر وأما السائل فلا تنهر وأما بنعمة ربك فحدث. صدق الله العلي العظيم. السلام عليكم. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. Tuesday night program, we discuss the tafsir of Quran, brief, concise, abridged tafsir of these surahs from the 30th juz from Quran. Last week we discussed Surah Layl, chapter number 92, and this week we're discussing chapter number 93, Surah Wad-Duha. Again, as now moving forward, there will be a couple of longer surahs, but primarily these will be the shortest of the surahs that you find in all of Quran. But of course, the shorter the surah, the more eloquence you find in it, the more um, substance you find in it, and the miraculous aspect of Quran is basically understood by looking at these shorter surahs of Quran. For example, this is another surah which begins with a qasam. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, after mentioning wal fajr, then mentioning la uqsimu bihadha al balad, then talking about wash-shamsi wa duhaha, then number 92 talks about wal layli idha saja, and then comes to the surah wad duha, rather wal layl, and then comes to the surah wad duha. So now after the night, Allah had taken the qasam by the night. He talks about the morning hours where the sun is at its brightest. So usually, the time that you're looking at duha, the word duha refers to the morning brightness. When sun is really bright and it's not fading or anything, it has come up. This is usually the time when it is also recommended to offer namaz-e-Eid when the sun has risen up. And usually this is the time when people have already waken up and they're no longer asleep. And of course you should have gotten up way before that, around time of Salat al-Fajr. But this is definitely that you've gotten up because it's sort of getting closer to that midday mark. So it says by the morning brightness, the sun that comes out with that brightness. I guess I don't want to be commenting too much on the scientific aspect of the sun, that whether it's closer or is further away when it rises or when it sets, but nonetheless you see that it is at that brightness that you see from the sun. So it says by the morning brightness and by the night when it is calm. Your Lord has neither forsaken you nor is he displeased with you. Of course, the conversation is with who? Prophet Rasulullah. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is speaking to him. Begins the surah by the brightness of the morning and when the night has calmed down. The calmness of the night is over. Now you get up in the morning. Now you get to your work. Now it's time for you to be active. The calmness of the night, which was there for you to sleep, which was there for you to take rest, which was there for you to, put away all the troubles of the day and just lie in your bed and concentrate and sleep and catch your sleep and, get the rest that you need so that you could be ready again, once again, for the next day's work. But of course, these days with all the, disruptions that we have in our lives, the distractions that we have in our lives, from the TV, from the gadgets, from the phones, and other things that we have incorporated in our lives, they don't let us enjoy that sort of sleep that we are in need of, right? And that is something which we have brought upon ourselves. Once again, because we don't have a great deal of time on Tuesday night, so we don't go in the in-depth analysis of the surah. So I won't be going ayah by ayah doing the tafsir, but it'll be a picture of this surah, which is wholesome picture of the surah, which you will be able to, inshallah, get out towards the end of the discussion. So the name of the surah is Duha, which is apparent from the very first ayah, Wad Duha, which is the mid-morning when the sun has come up. Based on narrations, Surah Duha and Surah Inshirah are considered to be one chapter. And since in Salat, a complete chapter must be recited after Surah Fatiha. So, La Salata illa bi Fatihatil Kitab. There is no Salat without Fatiha. You must recite Surah Fatiha. But after Surah Fatiha, you have a choice. You can choose to recite any surah you want, as long as you recite the complete surah. So you can go ahead and recite Surah Baqarah if you want to. If you want to stand up and recite Surah Baqarah, sure, go ahead. But by all means. But usually we tend to recite these shorter surahs from the 30th juz. These are the ones that we have memorized as well. But make sure when you're reciting the 4 surahs in this 30th juz, you don't recite these surahs individually. Rather, you recite them together. 2 surahs are Surah Wad-Duha, chapter 93, and Surah Al-Inshirah, chapter 94. These are back to back, and they have to be recited together with a difference of Bismillah in between in order for you to have a one complete surah recited in your namaz. So up until this point, if you recited Surah Alam Nashrah after Surah Fatiha only, then unfortunately the namaz is invalid. The namaz is batil. Now, whether you knew the masala or you didn't know the masala, of course you didn't know the masala, that's why you were reciting. Now, there are two types of people who are, there's one person who is exempt from this, the other one has to repeat. So this is ignorance, right? You did not know the masala, so you're ignorant about it. Now, ignorance is of two types. One, ignorance is out of innocence. The second one is out of negligence. If you are ignorant innocently, then you don't have to worry about it. But if you were ignorant by being negligent, meaning you had the means to learn and you had a doubt, but you continued to, disregard it, guess what? You should go ahead and make up those prayers in which you recited Surah Inshirah or Surah Wadduha individually. What is the other set of two surahs? Surah Fil and Surah Quraysh. If you recited Surah Fil all by itself after Surah Fatiha, your namaz is invalid. If you recited only Surah Quraysh after Surah Fatiha, your namaz is invalid. Why? You did not recite a complete chapter of Quran. These two chapters must be recited back to back after Surah Fatiha. So what is the way of doing it? After Surah Fatiha is completed, وَلَا you recite Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, Alam tara kayfa, you finish the surah, Ka'asfin ma'akul, you say Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, li'ilaf Quraysh, and all the way till the end. Similarly, you start this surah, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, Surah Fatiha until Wad-Dallin, and then you get to Surah Wadduha, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, Wadduha, wal-layli idha saja, ma waddaka rabbuka, until the end of the surah, وَأَمَّا بِنِعْمَةِ رَبِّكَ فَحَدِّثْ, and then you begin Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, Alam nashrah laka sadrak, all the way towards the end. You have to recite these two surahs back to back in order to consider it to be one chapter. So there are narrations which mention if these two surahs must be recited together, similar to Surah Quraysh and Surah Fil. If you look closely, so what is the reason? If you look closely, we can see the connection between the two chapters, so interrelated with each other that as if this is one chapter and divided with a Bismillah in between. What are the objectives and the lessons that we can derive? Two main objectives and the lessons. Number one, the discussion revolves around reminding the Prophet about the bounties of Allah and comforting him and consoling him. Allah begins by comforting the Prophet. مَا وَدَّعَكَ رَبُّكَ وَمَا قَلَى. Your Lord has not forsaken you. He has not forgotten about you. What is the pas manzar and the background of it? I'll get to that in a minute. Number two, the recommendation. The second objective is the recommendation for showing mercy and helping the orphans and the destitute. So towards the end it says, فَأَمَّا الْيَتِيمِ فَلَا تَقْهَرْ وَأَمَّا السَّائِلِ فَلَا تَنْهَرْ. So as far as the yatim is concerned, the orphans, don't shun them away. As far as don't use harshness towards them. When it comes to a sa'il, a beggar, وَلَا تَنْهَرْ. Do not shun them away. Make sure that you help them out. So helping the orphans and the destitute. So these are the two main objectives. Number one, consoling the heart of the Prophet, consoling him for the fact that the background of it, that the Quraysh were mocking him, that Allah has forgotten about you, there's no more revelation coming, you were in delusion that you received some words from God, and this is not true. So just to console him that we have not forgotten. And number two, to make sure that you are helping and showing mercy towards orphans and the destitute. There are 11 ayat in this chapter, 40 words and 172 alphabets. There's some keywords, the explanation of some keywords. Duha, for example, as I mentioned, midday, time when sun is the brightest. Also in terminology, it refers to the youth years of your life. Why? Those are the brightest. When you're too young, you're not the brightest. And when you're too old, these are not the brightest days of your life. That which is in between the two are the brightest. Why? Because you can see the picture of both sides, right? Sort of like when you climb up a mountain and you get to the top of the mountain, you can see what you left behind and you can see what lies ahead of the mountain. So imagine you start climbing up the mountain from here, you've seen what's here, you climbed all the way up, now you're standing over here, you haven't climbed down to the other side, but standing up here you can see the back and you can see the front. Both are in front of you. But when you were here, you couldn't see beyond the mountain on the other side of it. And when you're over here, you can't really see behind what is behind. But on the top of it, you're able to see the both sides. That's what your youth years are. When you are at that brightest, where you're able to see what you have left behind. And I'm not talking about youth years who are teenagers, no. I'm talking about when you're at 40. That's what your really youth is. Why? You can see, look back when you were a teenager, and you can see, ahead when those who are in their 70s and 80s, that you're headed in that direction. And you see, how is it like to be there, right? So that's what basically the brightest time, and that's why it is mentioned in Riwayat, that age of 40 is when your aql gets to its maximum level, right? If you are working on sharpening your intellect. Now, some people can be that genius when they're only teenagers. So you find in regards to Allama Hilli, he was the genius of his time. 15 years old, 16 years old, and he was already at the level of ijtihad. The level of ijtihad which is attained by our current scholars when they are probably 70 plus years old, right? It takes that much because you study, then you teach, then you produce some work. Now you have, complete knowledge of abwab, different sections of fiqh. Now you're considered mujtahid, a kamil, and you're able to give fatwa. People like Allama Hilli were already there at the age of 16 or 17, right? And many other, it's not just him, there are many other who have come through and were able to. You hear a great deal about Shaheed Sadr, right? Shaheed Sadr, he was a genius of his time. He only lived to be 49 years old. Only 49. He was martyred at the age of 49. Yet he's called Ayatullah Shaheed Sadr, right? He was at that level. His students were probably older than him. Imagine that. His students were older than him, who had been studying in the Hawza for longer than him, where many of them were his students. Why? Because he had already attained that level at a very young age. These are the nabigha, the geniuses. All right, coming back to the word duha, that it refers to the youth years of your life when you are the brightest. The word saja comes from the root suju, which is in the meaning of peace of mind and to rest. It also is used in the meaning of to cover something or to wrap something around. Where have you heard this word? Musajja refers to the kafan or the shroud, right? It's called musajja. What do you do with the shroud? You cover up the body. All right. So I'll skip through the words, the key words that are there. There are many of them that require explanation. The contents and the topics of the surah begins with two qasams, two oaths. And then Prophet is given the good news that Allah has not forsaken you. Moreover, Allah assures that He will provide to the Prophet so much that he will be satisfied. وَلَسَوْفَ يُؤْتِيكَ رَبُّكَ فَتَرْضَى. We will give you so much that you will be satisfied. In the last verses, he reminds Prophet of the past life to illustrate how Allah has always bestowed His loving care on him, and in the most difficult of the moments, He had supported the Prophet. This surah is coupled with Surah Inshirah, as I mentioned before. So, while Prophet is given this, feedback, if you want to call it, or reassurance by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, is a message for us as well, that Allah will not forsake you. The way He did not forsake Rasulullah, He will not forsake you either. He will not forget about you. If anything, you might become forgetful of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, but He will never be neglectful of you. Time and place of revelation. This chapter was revealed in Makkah after Suratul Fajr was revealed. Surah Duha is 93 in the present order of the chapters in Quran, but is number 11th based on the chronological order of the revelations of Quran. The atmosphere, the surah, was revealed after a brief pause in revelation. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala revealed the ayat of, Allah revealed 10 chapters before this. So He revealed the entire, for example, Surah Alaq, Iqra bismi rabbih. And He revealed Surah Qalam, revealed Surah Muddassir, revealed Surah Muzammil. Many of these chapters were revealed, and then there was a pause. Some mention about 3 years. Some mention a little bit less than 3 years. That there was no communication from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. No, Jibreel would not come down, had not come down for this period. So when that happened, the people of Makkah were mocking Prophet, saying that his Lord has forgotten about you. He's forsaken you. When Surah Al-Duha was revealed, it gave him a new strength and silenced the enemy. Not that he had any doubt Allah had forsaken him. No. What is a Nabi if he started doubting himself? This is because, of course, Nabi has emotions as well. Nabi is also, that's why he's created to be that perfect human being for you and I, so that we can look up to him. He has emotions. Imagine if Nabi is sent like a robot who does not have any emotions, how can he be a role model for you? So the fact that he has emotions, the fact that he has children, the fact that he cries if he loses his son, his son Ibrahim died, son of Rasulullah Ibrahim died, Rasulullah wept for him because he died in his infancy. So Rasulullah is not like emotionless being. No, he had all of these emotions. So Rasulullah was feeling the people, his family members, many of them were Quraysh, many of them were family members who were taunting him, mocking him, saying, what happened? You said this religion, you said this ayat, you said this is from Quran, from Allah and whatnot. What happened? No news from your God anymore. He's forgotten about you. In fact, there was no God to begin with. These sort of kalamat would come. And then right away, Rasulullah would feel. And so Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sends this surah to show the intimate manner in which Allah has comforted Rasulullah during his anxiety. So it led to some anxiety. Features and the specialties and the reward of reciting this surah. Ubay ibn Ka'ab narrates from the Prophet, who said, whoever recites the surah, he will be considered amongst those to whom Allah is satisfied with. We spend our time, and I'm out of my time as well, we spend our life trying to satisfy Allah. Guess what? You recite the surah, you are considered amongst those whom Allah is trying to satisfy. Imagine that. Allah is trying to satisfy. Right? Children are trying to satisfy their parents so they can get something out of them, right? I'll do this for my dad, I'll do this for my mom. So they'll give me something, for example, because I want something from them. Maybe this gadget, or maybe that thing, or maybe this, or maybe that. Some free time, some whatever it is that children are looking for these days. Now, similarly, you and I are trying to please Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But imagine if a father is trying to please his son. If a mother is trying to please the daughter, right? Imagine that. Allah is trying to please the servant. That's why he said, وَلَا سَوْفَ يُؤْتِيكَ رَبُّكَ فَتَرْضَى. Oh Prophet, will give you something soon which will satisfy you. What was that was given to Prophet? إِنَّا أَعْطَيْنَاكَ الْكَوْثَرَ. Indeed, we have given you Kawthar. Kawthar was given to Prophet. That was the means of satisfaction. So he said, whoever recites the surah is amongst those to whom Allah is satisfied, and Prophet will do the shafaat of such an individual. And of course, tenfold reward for those of whom each an orphan who takes care of orphans and the destitute. Of course, there are many other lessons that we can look into as far as the surah is concerned, but we'll remain content with this much. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to give us the tawfiq and ability to understand the Quran, act upon the ayat of Quran, and make Quran to be part of our daily routine. Wa akhiru da'wana anil hamdulillahi rabbil alameen. Sallallahu Muhammad wa alihi at-tahirin. Mutawajjih ziyarat. Assalamu alaikum ya Rasulullah, assalamu alaikum ya Nabi Allah, assalamu alaikum ya Habib Allah, assalamu alaikum ya Akhiyarat Allah, assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, assalamu alaikum ya Amirul Mu'mineen, Sayyid al-Wasiyyin, assalamu alaikum ya Fatimatu Zahra, Sayyidat Nisa al-Alamin, assalamu alaikum ya Sibta al-Rahma wa Imam al-Huda al-Hasan wal-Husayn, Sayyid al-Shabab ahli al-Jannah, assalamu alaikum Ali ibn Hussein, assalamu alaikum Muhammad ibn Ali, assalamu alaikum Jafar ibn Muhammad, assalamu alaikum Musa ibn Jafar, assalamu alaikum Ali ibn Musa, assalamu alaikum Muhammad ibn Ali, assalamu alaikum Ali ibn Muhammad, assalamu alaikum Hassan ibn Ali, assalamu alaikum Sahib al-Asr wal-Zaman, assalamu alaikum Imam al-Insa wal-Jan, assalamu alaikum Sharik al-Quran, ajjalallahu ta'ala farajak, وسهل الله مخرجك وظهورك